Good morning, out here at the Heron Rookery trail before sunrise, probably about 10 minutes or so before sunrise, and I come to, don't know how well you can see it, but this is a pretty big tree. Oh, probably, I don't know, 15 inches or so. See if you can see it this way. Anyway, we're gonna go under it. Okay, we made it. So when I wake up in the morning, I look at the forecast, like, is it gonna be clear? And sometimes the apps are wrong. I then forget the apps and I just go look out the window. When I see stars, I know it's gonna be good. So I entered the Heron Rookery trail. I parked at the west end, something like 1301 North 450. And the parking lot has, something like about 4 or 5 vehicles, depending on if you're with people and you can block someone in. This is real. Probably can't see it yet. Curving trail. You could hear the highway you hear is 80, 94. One of the great things about snow is it covers the road. Tire noise is often way more than engine noise on a modern car. So we're walking so northeast, walking towards the Little Calumet River. The beginning of the Little Calumet River is up at a neat county park, Red Mill County Park in LaPorte. It is so beautiful. So, the traffic's unusually loud. It's Sunday morning. Of course, the Heron Rookery Trail is popular for wildflowers. People always talk about trillium. Well, there's way, way more trillium, if that's what you like, at the J. Timothy Ritchie, which is the Shirley Hines property. There's like, it's gotta be like 10 to 50 times more. You'll see big areas of it. But of course, the Heron Rookery Trail has a lot more. What's one of them called? Dutch's Britches or something. You see so many trees that are down. Maybe behind me, you can see. Wow, there was something. You come here when there's snow to make absolutely sure that you have crampons or those little metal things that go on the bottom of your boots, because I'm gonna go like this. If you could see, you could easily slip down, roll down. And look at this. You can see this was not part, evidently, of the trail here. It ends. I mean, you got to turn this way. So people are here in the spring. It's real popular. Very, very, very popular. Oh, you might see 20 people out here. Now when the mosquitoes come, whenever that is, it could be late April or May, it just depends on, the weather, but then you will not see anyone out here because it is, unless you like mosquitoes. I was out here one day and there was a fisherman. He was sort of what you call a professional fisherman. He traveled around and he had a vest on and he was down sort of in the water a little bit. And anyway, I talked with him and he had something that looked like a turkey baster. Oh, it might have been 6 inches long. It looked just like a little turkey baster with a rubber ball that you'd squeeze and then suck something up. And I said, what's that for? He said, well, there's a certain type of fish which you can't fish for, and there's another fish that looks like it. And he said the only way you could tell which fish is when you catch it, you have to take out some of the stomach contents, and based on the contents you know what kind of fish is, and then you know if you have to put it back. Well, that's pretty traumatic, I would guess, for those fish. There's also something here which I guess isn't too common. It's called brown trout. So I'm not a fisherman, but that's something. So like I might expect to see deer here now. There are some incredibly old trees. Give you an idea how big it is. Oh, it's got to be at least 33 feet, 36 inches. Now, depending upon the tree, you multiply the number of inches in diameter, measured at about 5 or 6 feet. So let's say that's 36 inches. You multiply it by 3, that would be 90, 108 years old. If it's at the other end, 5 times 36, 150 plus 30, 180 years old. So you gotta find out what kind of tree and what the factor is that you multiply by. This is a straight through trail. Oh, I don't know if it's 1 3/4 miles one way, something like that. Now, if you enter in the springtime, if you enter in the east side, you get out of that is a much bigger parking lot, 20 some spots or so. And you start walking west, everything is green, 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 green. There's no wildflowers until you get to this bridge, and when you cross that bridge, it's amazing. That's when the wildflowers begin. So people wonder, well, why is that? Well, if you look at it, there was a farm to the south of here, and the farm is closest to The farm is closest to that trail there. And as a result, the herbicides, pesticides are there. And they evidently are strong enough to affect the more delicate flowers and not some of the hardier plants. So as you get close to that bridge and you cross that ditch or whatever it would be called, then there's a lot more forest which blocks the herbicide or pesticide. It's interesting to note that herbicides and pesticides were not used essentially pesticides were not used before World War II. So during that World War II, lots of chemicals were made by companies to kill things. And when the war ended, these companies said, hey, who do we sell this to? So someone said, hey, let's sell it to farmers. So they did that, and that's when it's been all downhill in farming. So I was going to talk about glyphosate. Glyphosate this is quite an interesting tree. It's narrower down here. It gets wider here. So glyphosate was invented around 1950 by a Dr. Martin in Switzerland. And his wording was, do not use this as a general herbicide or pesticide because it's water soluble. What it was to be used, one application was something having to do with cleaning out of pipes. So let's say, for example, there's some major roadway, and for some reason you can't get the necessary equipment to clean out this sewer. You could put chemicals in and glyphosate, and you do it in such a way where you capture the chemical on the other side after it's killed the stuff that's in there. Well, anyway, that patent was sold. One of the companies along the way of ownership was Johnson & Johnson, then another company, and ultimately Monsanto bought it. So they initially sold it to farmers. They said, hey, you got all these weeds around your farm. If you killed those weeds, you could then plant more of your crop. So because there's so much beautiful dead trees here, you'll see lots of mushrooms. Not now because it's October 9th. So back to Monsanto. So they started selling it to the farmers, and sure enough, it killed the weeds around their crop. What do you think some of those weeds were? Milkweed, which grew better than their crop. So you'll see, I'm gonna show you what that looks like. So in some cases, it's like a 12-foot drop. So if in the snow where it's turned to ice, it could be very slippery, so you gotta have that. Also, similarly, if there's huge amounts of rain, it is amazingly muddy, especially downright for water. So then the farmers said, hey, let's put this, not the farmers, Monsanto said, hey, let's put this in the hands of the general public. Hey, they don't read the labels. It's in a tiny font. They're never gonna know what they're doing. So what happens? They have a Super Bowl commercial, and they have this big tough guy, and he is using Roundup. That's now the brand name for consumers. And it kills very good the weeds. It also very good kills good necessary microbes in your microbiome, and your microbiome is your collection of microbes. So people say, how important is that? Well, if you were to line up all the cells in your body and count them, you have 99 trillion microbial cells and only 1 trillion human cells. So when you look at a person, what do you see? Of course, you see the human cells because they're far bigger. In order to see a microbial cell, you need a magnification, say, of 1,000. Now, when you talk about viruses, which we heard a lot about in the last couple of years, that requires an electron microscope to see. So now we got the general public who don't read labels spraying everywhere in neighborhoods. Before, glyphosate was just in the farm areas. So then Monsanto said, okay, we conquered the land over the general public, their yards. We conquered the perimeter of a farm. So now what are we gonna do? We are gonna conquer the farmland itself. So they come up with genetically modified seeds. They're able to plant the stuff and spray glyphosate on top of it. So now we have crops with glyphosate on it. But wait, there's more. So if that's not good enough, Monsanto want to keep increasing sales. And they say to the farmers, hey, you've got wheat and you can't sell the wheat. You can't sell the wheat because it's got to dry. Hey, we could use glyphosate to dry the wheat and you could get it to market quicker. So $1 today is way better than $1.04 in the future. So it was about 1996 farmers started doing that. Guess what happened around 1997? All kinds of illnesses started to go up. One of them is something I never heard this word ever in the first 30 some years of my life, and that was gluten intolerance. And people say, oh well, how is that related to glyphosate? Well, I know some people, and they've had gluten intolerance. This is a sap sucker, and they go all around it to get the sap. So So these people who have gluten intolerance go on a vacation, and they go to a country called France, and they go to a city called Paris. You may have heard of it. And they have croissants and other food. Well, guess what? They're not sick. Why is that? France very, very, very sparingly use glyphosate. So what does that mean? So now that proves they're not using glyphosate, and the only difference between the crops is America's using glyphosate, France isn't, and so people aren't sick. So these people return to America, and they go to their doctor, and they say, doctor, I went to France and I could eat all this food that I couldn't. And a smart doctor might say, why did you come back? So anyway, now countries, I just heard on the news, not that the news is, the general news is a reliable source, but what you do is you could do, and you could actually contact governments and find out, but the governments are now reducing and eliminating the use of glyphosate. So is America doing that? Well, countries, Germany, I think that was, so Bayer is in Germany. Bayer bought Monsanto a few years back. They're a little bit behind in comparison to Britain, but anyway, there are people now banning it completely. So I'm gonna just show you here some mushrooms. So to wind up on that glyphosate. So glyphosate kills the good bacteria. So you've now eliminated the stuff in your microbiome, or greatly reduced it, that kills cancer cells. And so now you're susceptible. Who knows, maybe you could drink glyphosate, and I don't recommend it, but maybe if you were in a perfectly clean room with nothing, you could drink glyphosate and maybe you wouldn't get cancer. But the minute you go around something that is cancer causing, you now get that. So what is one of the greatest tools to squash out cancer? So I was in a mushroom class, and they asked for testimonies about the medicinal powers. And so I'm just gonna jump to the one about turkey tail. And the man, he had been sick for months. His testimony was, he said, I gotta say up front, he said, I hate doctors, hate nurses, hate lab technicians, hate hospitals, hate clinics, hate cancer centers, and I didn't want to go. So finally his family dragged him in, and his family said, hey, who knows, maybe there's just some, that's a blue jay that was flying by us. So the family said, hey, maybe there's some pill that you take and you're gonna get better. So they go to the doctor. The doctor said, yeah, you sure do look bad, and we're gonna give you a battery of tests. So one of the tests is looking at your white blood cell count, and if it's elevated, you could have some various problems, infections that also could be related to cancer. So they did a bunch of tests, took blood, and said, come back in a few days and we'll discuss. So he comes back, and the doctor says, I have bad news. And that bad news is you have pancreatic cancer. And we are not able to do a surgery. We're not able to use chemotherapy, chemicals. And by the way, the chemotherapy is basically indiscriminate, meaning it's going to kill everything or most everything in this certain area. And hopefully the good stuff will come back. So this man left the doctor's office and he called his hippie friends in Southern California. And he called 3 of them. He didn't, he talked to them one-to-one, and he didn't let the other ones know that he talked to someone else. So he said, hey, what do you got to kill cancer, in particular I have pancreatic? And each of them said turkey tail mushroom. So it's, you don't go and just bite off turkey tail and eat it. You extract stuff from it. So here's an example. If I said we're gonna have tea, I don't have this material for tea and we just chew on it like chewing tobacco. We use water, heat it, and extract it, the flavor. Well, so somehow the turkey tail mushroom is extracted, and what do you do with it? Here's the, I think this is the second fridge. No, this is the third one. I hear some bigger branches up here crackling, so there's probably deer jumping around. So his hippie friends in unity all say turkey tail. So he goes on a heavy regimen of taking a lot of it. You could take it as a liquid, you could take it as a powder, you could take it in a capsule, you could put it in a tea or coffee. But what does turkey tail do? So let's say orange is a cancerous cell and all the good ones are green. The fungi is now, turkey tail is in you and it says, hey, there's orange, kill it. So it focuses on that cell and kills it. It doesn't touch the green stuff. So I'm trying to do this, in comparison. And you say, well, that sounds pretty crazy, and why doesn't the pharmaceutical industry just sell that? Well, it's not profitable. Turkey tail grows oftentimes, well, all over the world, but also, on dead woods. And so if you don't know this, when you see a mushroom, that is the fruit of fungi. So if you've watched Fantastic Fungi or read some books, you know that in like a step or so, you've just crossed 300 miles of network fungi. And that allows trees to communicate and a whole bunch more. But let's get back to the fungi. So the mushrooms are fruit, and they're the ones that spread the spores so that it increases. So I'm here in the forest, and this is an old growth forest, and there are so many trees which are down, and nature wastes nothing. So here's this great tree provided oxygen to us by taking our CO2. Here is the beaver. Must not have liked that flavor and stopped, or maybe that beaver was killed by, say, a coyote or something, and didn't return. So you look in this forest and you'll see these trees provided oxygen for us. They provided shade for us. They provided color for us. Why is that important? When you see pleasant things, that increases the life of microbes. And you say, really? Well, it's true. I didn't make this up. Go to scholar.google.com. So whatever I say, I didn't invent. I've studied it. And I don't study it from one scientist. And I don't study it from one country. So on scholar.google.com, it does the search of papers, research papers. Oh, there's a squirrel up there. So anyway, so I study papers from all around the world. And you say, how do you read Japanese or German or French? Well, Google can translate them. So oftentimes when I do hikes, and they're either hikes just particularly planned to be by myself, or people just didn't show up for some emergency reasons, I will listen to papers. You can, some of the sites specifically have where you could click to listen, or on any phone. Let's say I'll just pick the iPhone. You could select any text. It could be a text message, an email, a website. There are apps that will designed to read a website, and you could just listen as you walk. So for hours I would listen to things. I remember this one paper I was on. This is exactly how I remember this. I was on Trail 2 at the Indiana Dunes State Park. I was on the western end of Trail 2. So when you're on the western end of Trail 2, you're very close to the campground, which would be north. So, hey, I see the sun going through the trees. That's the sunrise. I'm gonna see if I could take a picture. When you're doing videos, I'm just gonna talk again, iPhone. Up in the right corner, there's a white circle with another rim around it, and you press that button while you're doing video. It saves a snapshot. So that way you could be recording videos and have snapshots. But you say, well, I forgot to do that, or I didn't know about it. So you say you're watching the video, pause it, wait a second, and the symbols showing that it's paused will go away. Then you could do a screen snapshot. So if you do a screen snapshot, most people are pressing the right power button and the upper volume control to take a snapshot. And oftentimes you press the right button faster and it just shuts off, doesn't take a screen snapshot. But if you get used to it, you can press it both at the correct timing and get your screen snapshot. Well, you can also set up an iPhone where when you tap on the back, it does a function. So on the back of my iPhone, I can be holding it. So say I'm watching a video, pause it. Hey, I like that image. Tap the back of my iPhone twice and it does a screen snapshot. By the way, it shows Gaia just popped up saying I went 1 mile. So that's 1 mile from the west lot. So anyway, back to the fungi here in the forest, and I've been walking looking for a good example. So the trees provided shade, they provided oxygen, they provided color, they provided beauty. Now let's talk about, it's very still now, but if you heard wind going through the leaves, sound increases the life of microbes. But wait, there's more. Trees are great places for birds. So you hear birds and they're pleasing. Oh, hey. So now we got birds in the trees, more sound, which increases. So what if you increase, so the average life expectancy of a microbe is about 12 hours. What if you could increase it by 12 to make it 12.01? 12.003. Well, what that means is this should be the 4th bridge. This is the large one. That's where the farm was, the closest part. And over on this side, you barely see any wildflowers. And so if you parked in the east lot, say the Michigan City side, you approach this bridge, it's been all pretty much green. And you can see right at this point, when you cross that bridge, that's where the wildflowers begin. Well, that down here is where there's a lot more forest, so it's a buffer zone. I've not too often seen water here, but it would have to be when it's been real rainy. But you can see there's water there. I don't know if it looks like probably from the Little Calumet River. So I'm looking for some, here we go. So here are trees, and the fungi is breaking it down year after year, and it goes from solid to chunky, smaller chunks, powder, fine powder, and that's fertilizer. So the tree is now part of the other trees. But guess what? Right by that tree that's dead, the fungi's consuming it. There are other trees of the same species that are alive, and they're not killed. There's other kinds of plants, other kinds of trees, they're not killed. So that fungi is selective of the cells. It knows what's to kill. Similarly, turkey tail, when it goes back into the human, it can see cancer cells and it kills them. So I mean, the earth speaks out to us. If you study nature, the nature of nature, you will learn so much. The Native Americans, of course, knew way more than we because they didn't have the pharmaceutical industry. And people say, oh, Ron, you're so hard on the pharmaceutical industry. Well, as I say, oh, yes, every minute, every second of every day, there's a medicine that saves people's lives. And I always joke, that medicine was created by accident. Just like vulcanized rubber by Goodyear, or 3M notes, the sticky notes. But seriously, yeah, the pharmaceutical industry has done some good stuff, but also they're very good of just, those are turkeys. Those were turkeys. And those are squirrels. So there were squirrels and turkeys right there. This particular tree is a good example. This might be false turkey tail, which is green, but the regular turkey tail looks similar, but it's brown. But again, it's late. It's been cold, into the 30s several days. So the fungi is selective. The pharmaceutical industry may now just be starting to sell it, but there's lots of companies. I use lion's mane mushroom, which rebuilds things that have failed in your brain. And the company I happen to use is OM, which stands for organic mushroom. And it's available at your local health food store. But the problem I had was, so I'm on it a month, and as I'm starting to get low, I go to the stores. I called or went to 3 of them, Valparaiso, Chesterton, and Michigan City. They did not have any. So I went to a company you might have heard of, which I don't like using, Amazon. So Amazon is just not one big giant company. They have, if you're a company, you could sell through them. So Amazon's the gateway, just like Walmart does that. Walmart, you buy this inflatable kayak and it says it ships from the factory. So they're a gateway to that. I'm going to go down here and show you. So here's that tree that fell down a long time ago and is being chewed up, and there's fine stuff here. So typically I see what I see is the base of the tree snapped, and then as you get farther away from the base, that's where the powder is in, and it just, that's the way that I often see it. So in summary, nature provides all kinds of things. The Native Americans who knew more about it were pushed out of this area. In 1830, our United States government created something called the Indian Relocation Act. And so Native Americans here in Porter County, for example, roughly 860 of them were told, hey, you got to go live west of Mississippi. The Europeans are coming. They're smelly and got germs, and you should move. The west of the Mississippi is much prettier than the east. So anyway, all these things were said. So Native Americans left, and it's called the Trail of Tears, and it wasn't just right here, it was all around. And so many died on the way, whether it was starvation, or they tried to escape, or they fought. So I'm gonna stop here and I'm gonna do some photography. And so anyway, thanks for if you went through this video all the way to the end. Thank you, and research it. Don't trust me. Scholar.google.com. As I say, you'll get these papers. Every word has many syllables. Every sentence has many words. Every paragraph has many sentences. And you have to do the ladders, which means you have to keep drilling down, going down a rung until you get to the bottom. And as I say, the bottom has words like a, and the. So if you keep going, you're going to get there. You're going to figure it out. It takes time, but it's very fun. So I'm going to just leave you for a minute with this image.